I work for a company called Insperity. Insperity is an end-to-end HR solution for small and mid-market companies. We do a lot to help support our clients so that they can essentially take care of their employees. I mean, that's essentially what we do. We're an HR company, but there are so many more things that go along with that, and I'm sure that, Kara, you're going to be able to speak to a lot of that as well. So please jump in if you have some insights or questions, especially. Can you guys see my screen? You can see this chart here. It says business challenges have HR solutions.
Yes, we can.
Yep, sure can.
Very good. So it seems fairly obvious when you're talking about building a team or building a company that it really is all about people. However, it becomes very easy, especially in certain phases of the business life cycle, to get mired in certain tactical details and to lose track of what the most important thing is, and that is your people. It's one of the biggest line items in your P&L, and it is, generally speaking, one of the most volatile, because people come and people go, and if you hire the wrong person, they'll stay. That's always unfortunate. But what it really requires is some forethought. As you're growing your business, you really need to start to consider all of the things around growing that team and making sure it's a cohesive team and works well. So this chart is a really great example of why we believe that business challenges, all of them, have HR solutions, because it's going to be people who are actually implementing your policies and solving these problems on a day-to-day basis. And what you don't want to have to do is micromanage them, be in the weeds with them all the time. The goal of the business leader is to have that strategic vision and hire the right people so that they're going to execute on that vision without a lot of hand-holding, right? Now, at the stage that you guys are at, and I hope I'm on track with this, by the way. I do this talk a lot, but I want to make sure that it's relevant to you guys. But my understanding is that the stage most of y'all's businesses are in this entrepreneurial stage where, you know, the graph is at its kind of lowest. You're really just trying to identify some areas in which you're going to pivot so that you can come up with the best product and market fit. And in so doing, you're going to have certain challenges, but there aren't going to be quite as many challenges around building your team and scaling your operation, right? Mostly because you're really focused on, you know, proving your product and getting that network built so that you've got a team of advisors to help you get to where you want to be. However, it sneaks up on you really quickly, right? This is going to be your seed round, Series A. You know, we kind of like to group them in such a way. And then as this chart goes up and goes through the business life cycle, it identifies these areas that are going to be most relevant to you and your team. But when you're in the seed round and you get that first round of funding, maybe it's only $500,000, but all of a sudden it's go time, you know, and the clock is really, it's ticking on that money. A lot of times what people are using that money for is to develop product, but many people are already starting to scale their teams at that stage, right? They're hiring a couple key hires, maybe a CTO, a CMO, and so even though you've got your core founders team and you've done a really good job of partnering with the right people, you've got good vision and you're cohesive, that's kind of like a family dynamic at that stage. The second you start bringing in people from the outside in, you do start to see other challenges come up. And so this is where we say you really need to have a talent advantage. You need to gain a talent advantage. People will need to have that desire to come work for you, for them to really be the most effective recruit. And in so doing, you're going to have to tell that message. You're going to have to give that message or tell that story out there in the ecosystem, why you're the right company for them to come work for, because you really want to be attracting the top, you know, the best in class talent. You're also going to have a need for administrative infrastructure pretty quickly. There are a lot of bolt-on type things that you can bring to the fray, HRIS systems that help you pay payroll and that kind of thing. But that's really a very tactical thing. Gaining a talent advantage is a strategic decision. As you're achieving viability, you're going to really start to accelerate, and you're going to get into this emerging growth phase. And this is the point where you don't want to be reinventing those wheels or putting together the systems that you need in place. Because what we're talking about is having a culture by design, right? If you don't have a culture by design, what you end up with is a culture by default. And I don't know if any of you have ever worked for a company where they had a culture by default, but oftentimes it does not work out well. So you're going to be looking at leadership development and dealing with this talent access as you start to scale. But if you get your administrative infrastructure in place and you've really thought it through early on, you've thought about why people want to come work for you, and you've got your seed round in play, you really should already have a roadmap to what you're going to be doing in this emerging growth phase. Because what we're then talking about is getting into some risk mitigation, right? When you're hiring teams, when you're out there in the marketplace and you're dealing with proprietary technology or IP, risk mitigation is really the key. And it all boils down to your people and how they handle that risk. So having methods in place to protect your profit, having organizational alignment, that all kind of needs to be laid out in advance. But again, what we're getting back to is having a culture by design, by developing your leadership. And then the holy grail of this entire exercise is getting that employee engagement, right? So ask yourselves now, you're engaged in your own business. You've got processes in place that you believe in, and you've got a vision that you believe is going to pan out in the near term. But how do you hire that person from outside your company and get them engaged? It really takes some forethought and making sure that you're planning this stuff out from the get-go. Because like I said, once you get here, this is where your hair's on fire. You're trying to keep all the plates spinning, and you're also trying to accelerate your growth and improve your cash flow. But if you haven't already dealt with some of these things, it starts to come a little unraveled. Right? So some of the things that I like to talk to my clients and prospects about are developing benefits plans and developing training and development programs so that you've got things in place when you identify that person who you brought on as an intern, but they really are starting to look more like a leader within the milieu. You want to make sure that you get them the training that they need. And these are the kinds of things that really develop a lot of loyalty within your team, right? When they know that you're taking care of them, they are in turn going to do whatever they can to take care of you. So I'd like to just stop for a moment and just ask, one, Paul, is this the direction that we need to be going in terms of talking about these beginning stages here of planning around culture?
Yeah, I think so, precisely, right? We're all in this to figure out how to, most importantly, survive and compete. And that talent advantage we've talked about a little bit, that talent advantage very, very closely relates to how early investors, angel investors, for example, are really just looking for the right people. Well done, right track, I think.
I think that's spot on too, because those investors are absolutely looking at your team. They're looking to see how cohesive you are and whether or not you've got those plans in place. So that's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Does anybody else have any questions before I move on about this chart and what some of these key milestones mean for your business?
Yeah,
Okay.
when you were talking about IP before, were you just like referencing like trade secrets and NDAs? Are there any other ways to protect proprietary technology? Or are you talking something else?
That's actually a really good question, and that is what I was kind of referring to. In the world of new technology, you're always trying to protect your IP, right? NDAs, I hate to say it, don't necessarily do that, because if somebody gets your IP, they're going to run with it regardless of whether you have an NDA. right? So what you need to be is one step ahead of your competition. And I loved that that's what you started the meeting with right off the bat, identifying your competition, what gives you a competitive advantage. Because the further along you are in the development of your product or service, you know, the less ability, you know, your competition has to sort of catch up, clone your idea and get it to market. You're already kind of well on your way. But it's really about getting your employees and your team to buy into the fact that protecting your IP is paramount to the success of your business. And so that's kind of goes back into the culture. You know, you're starting to communicate with people on a regular basis. You want to make sure they understand your vision and that you have a vision and that they're in the kind of place that they can grow and they can be, you know, they can be part of something bigger down the line.